Welcome to this session of WinLossWeek, the world's largest online event dedicated to win-loss analysis. Special thanks to all of our partners for making their contributions to this event and to make it such a success. The title of this session is Processes That Make or Break Your Win-Loss Program. My name is Braydon Anderson. I'm the VP of Operations here at Clozd. And what that entails is that my team is responsible for scheduling and publishing all of the interviews that Clozd conducts for their clients. I joined Clozd over 3 years ago and have implemented many of the processes that we will talk about today. Ultimately, you can use this session to learn from my experience scheduling thousands of interviews for world-class organizations. So you just got the go-ahead to start a win-loss program. And depending on a few factors, you're either going to do it yourself or use a third-party vendor to help with the running of the program. So what's next? I think what a lot of people don't fully realize is that there's a lot more that goes into a win-loss program outside of the interview itself. After developing, the first thing of just the interview guide of what are the set of questions you want to ask, actually carrying out the interviews can take a fair amount of work, both before and after each conversation. Here's just a brief outline of what goes into the process. First thing is just to prepare a list of qualified contacts to reach out to. Who are the individuals that you're going to even try to interview as part of your program, and who has to give the appropriate permissions in your organization to reach out to them and to get that list. Then you have to email or call each of those contacts to schedule the interview. You have to then conduct the interview, as we mentioned. You have to record the interview as to not miss anything. You have to transcribe the interview. You then have to analyze every single interview that comes through, both the individual interview and all the interviews that you're going to conduct. What are the data that's showing across all these interviews? So that's tagging the themes, highlighting quotes, composing a summary, pulling out key metadata fields, etc. And then on top of that, most importantly, you have to share what you've learned from this program and from conducting these interviews. And so as you can imagine, just that's exhausting. There's a lot that goes into actually running a program outside of the interview itself. Conducting each interview takes a fair amount of work both before and after each conversation. And really understanding and optimizing each step of the process can make or break your program. In my time at Clozd, I've heard many business leaders lament failed win-loss implementations just because they neglected, underestimated, or mismanaged parts of the entire process. And one thing that we'd even recommend is that if you choose to hire a vendor to run your win-loss program, don't just vet the resume of the interviewers, the prices they charge, or just the look and feel of the deliverables. While those are really important, we also recommend taking the time to vet how they will execute the entire win-loss process, knowing that really their execution of each step of this process is going to be a strong determination of how successful the program is. Efficient scheduling and transcript output means higher participation rates, a better interview experience, quicker turnaround times, cleaner transcripts, etc. And so really a mastery of these following tasks is going to be key in making any program successful, on schedule, and on budget. So what I'd like to do now is just walk through what are the key things that you should be doing as part of each of these core processes in your win-loss program. So it may come as a surprise, but for most companies, the biggest hurdle for scheduling interviews is really compiling and approving a list of interview candidates. And so that's really the first step is getting a list of names. Really expect to consult your CRM at least once a quarter, if not monthly, to be getting the freshest contacts. And really, minimizing this bottleneck is going to be instrumental in getting names on a continual basis. Waiting on a slow drip of names to fill a cup just isn't going to be efficient, and it's going to be really expensive in the long run. Then once you have the names, we recommend automate as much as possible. So a few tips. First is to use an email service. Your list of contacts will likely be large. Find a service where you can upload a CSV file of contacts in bulk and to send in bulk, rather than one at a time. Then follow up. People need reminders. How many automated emails you decide to send is really up to you, but we strongly recommend a balance of persistence coupled with professionalism. We typically send about 5 emails over the course of a 2 to 3 week time period. The next part is to use a scheduling link. Don't just send an email and hope they respond with the best time. Make the process as easy as possible for them to actually schedule and get something on the calendar. And so really make it just as easy as possible for interviewees to sign up. Even simple tools like Calendly, Doodle, or TimeTap can work really well. Let your interviewees pick a time slot that's easy to coordinate, reference, and even reschedule as necessary. And then the last thing I'll mention is to track participation rate. You want to be improving over time, and there are different levers you can pull in part of the scheduling process, whether it's changing the messaging, changing how frequent you're scheduling or sending out the emails, maybe doing incentives, things like that that will greatly enhance the participation rate. So A/B and test a couple of things. We've obviously done a lot of experience on our end that work really well, but we recommend doing that if you're going to be doing it yourself as well to make sure you're getting the best participation rate as possible. You don't want to go back to the well all the time, right? And what I mean by that is you don't want to always go back to your CRM and constantly have to ask for more names. So you want to maximize everything that you're doing with the names that you're provided. And that's, again, potentially one of the benefits of using a third party is it doesn't just save you time. It's often more inviting to contacts. People are more likely to speak with and frankly speak more candidly with a neutral third party than to the company that they just told no. So definitely something to consider there. The next part, interviewing. The actual interview itself. So the first thing is create an interview guide. We mentioned this earlier. The interview guide is going to be really the guide to the conversation. And the big point I want to make here is this is not a survey over the phone. This is a bank of questions that you can leverage and reference to guide the conversation based off of how the interviewee is answering questions. Again, the point of this is to understand why you're winning and losing deals. That you're trying to find out why you're winning and losing, and to conduct a survey over the phone isn't necessarily going to give you that. And so our recommendation and our methodology is use an interview guide, be adaptable, be flexible, and really make sure that at the end of those conversations, you clearly know why that deal was won or lost. Obviously, apply interviewing best practices. There are tons of resources out there for this, but you're going to be interviewing these senior level individuals. You want to make sure you're leaving a good representation on you and your company is someone that could potentially be a future buyer again. And the last thing is don't miss a thing. We recommend recording, if possible, every single interview. Don't just try to fiercely take notes of each interview. You're going to miss things. It's disrespectful to the interviewee. It's going to be interrupting. We just strongly recommend to, in order to not miss a thing and provide the best experience for you and for the interviewee, is to actually record every single interview. And there are tons of services out there like Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, et cetera, to really record these different types of interactions. So you've done the interview. What do you do next? And the first thing to do is transcribe that recording. So again, we recommend record and transcribe every interview where possible. If you don't have the time or resources to transcribe the interviews yourself, which again, I don't know if I necessarily recommend, you're probably all super busy. I don't recommend you taking the time to go and transcribe it yourself. There are tons of services out there. So consider outsourcing to a qualified third party. Use a service or partner that you trust to really protect your company's privacy and confidentiality. Again, there's services out there. Consider outsourcing transcription to things like Scribby, Rev, Otter, Temi, whatever it may be. There are a lot of options out there, both from a human transcription to an automated transcription. And in our experience, human transcription services still far outperform the automated ones. Obviously, there's a cost to that. And so it's just something to definitely keep in mind. You know, when you do the automated, it's somewhere between 10 to 25 cents per minute, which can be really inexpensive. If you look at more of the human transcription, it's going to be anywhere from like $1 to $2 per minute. So do whatever works within your budget, but we strongly recommend using some type of service like that if you don't have the time to do it yourself. And then once every single interview is completed, proofread it. Before you send it out to the organization, make sure you're proofreading every single one of these to watch for typos, especially if you're not doing it yourself. You can't always rely on someone else to know your competitors' names and spelling and your company name and your industry and your product and offerings, et cetera. Now, the biggest part of a win-loss program is actually making change with that. And so it's really important to develop a methodology for analyzing themes and trends across all interviews. It's really important to do two things with your interviews. The first one is to look at each individual interview and see what are the key findings in those individual interviews, whether it's a training opportunity, whether it's a great insight because of what a buyer specifically said. There's going to be a lot of nuggets in those individual interviews. But then there's obviously a lot of insight across all of the interviews that you're conducting. And so we strongly recommend finding and creating a methodology that allows you to track the themes and the trends over time. So that's both on how you report on it and how you actually tag those. It's really important to create a methodology that you can use consistently of how do I tag each interview with 3 to 5 to 7 themes of what were the key things and the key drivers that came up in that interview to really help me understand what's surfacing over time. And that's one of the biggest value adds is really this concept of identifying the real areas of improvement that are worth acting on. So the other thing that we recommend is throughout the program, freely share the individual transcripts and the themes to the key stakeholders and colleagues at your organization. Again, this is crucial to making sure you're having a successful program is, are changes actually happening because of the insights that are being found? Just one quick example that we have seen and how the processes of your win-loss program can really make a big difference. And so at Clozd, we have the opportunity, obviously, to work with a lot of great clients. Before hiring us, some clients are maybe a little more diligent than others in vetting not just the entire vendor and the things we mentioned earlier, but also the processes of the various win-loss vendors. And so in certain cases, these prospective clients will pilot our services alongside competitor services. And in one such bake-off, a prospective client wanted to work with us and another vendor. And so they simultaneously conducted 10 interviews, 5 with us and 5 with another vendor. And ultimately, Clozd was able to publish 7 interviews in the time that the other vendor was able to only schedule 2 interviews in the same amount of time. This hands-on experiment really confirmed to this particular client that not all vendors approach the win-loss process the same. And it was really easy for them to select Clozd and make that the final decision for them. And so had they selected the other vendor, it's likely that the program would have sputtered along and the interviews that they paid for might have never been completed. So just something to really consider as you're determining what's the best route for your organization. Do we do this ourselves? Do we do it a third party? If we do it a third party, this is another basically quiver in the arrow that you need to be considering of what are the factors we need to be looking for when looking for a third party vendor. Great ideas like win-loss often crash in execution. Don't let that happen to you. Invest adequate time and resources really into developing effective processes for scheduling, interviewing, transcribing, and analysis, and making sure you have the bandwidth and resources to do so. They really can make or break your win-loss program. Thanks so much for attending this session. We've loved having you at WinLossWeek, and have a great day.